can't you just let me be happy, Nishigori? Why? Why do you insist on me suffering? On another note, this is why I don't feel like the previews really spoil anything about the episode at the end of the day. Because when I walked into this episode, I wasn't exactly expecting a fucking attack squadron to invade Mistleton, cockblock the entire wedding, and brainwash Kokoro and Mitsuru. I just wasn't expecting that. And I suppose that this is what all of that foreshadowing was alluding to in the opening and ending. Mitsuru and Kokoro being torn apart, and Kokoro ending up alone in the ED. Not quite as bad as a death flag, but still pretty fucked up. Hello everybody, I am PhenomSage, and welcome back to another Darling in the Franxx episode review. Today we are going to be talking about episode 18, When the Sakura Blooms. And just wow, lots to cover this episode, but how about we talk a bit more about this whole Kokoro and Mitsuru situation. I really dug the way that the actual invasion scene was handled because it felt very tense and the direction was just on point, cutting in between both the attackers and the wedding itself, and that really just added to the intensity for me. Like, whenever you have me yelling at the screen, "Hurry! Kiss before it's too late!" it's just definitely a good sign. Now, as I said before, I do think that this brainwashing is what they've been alluding to this whole time, not an actual death. But the implications of the end of this episode are pretty important, as we know from the entire Hero 02 situation that these altered memories can and likely will return at some point in the future. Even near the end of the episode, we already see Kokoro looking at her ring and remembering Sakura. The only question will be if this memory return only happens on Kokoro's end for a bit, or if we'll see Mitsuru remembering things next episode as well, since in the ED, it would explain why she looks so sad and alone, remembering her past with Mitsuru but him not remembering the same. I don't think that they'll keep them separated forever, but it will probably be like this for a little while. Maybe they'll need to pilot together again in order to regain those memories in full. Either way, we also have to take into consideration that even though they've lost their memories, Kokoro still likely has a baby inside of her, something that I don't think anyone knows about at this point in time. This will most definitely be a plot element in the future, and it's going to be huge when it starts coming to fruition. Kokoro and Mitsuru's situation here also kind of throws a wrench in a lot of theories that I and others have had in the past. For one, if gaining emotions to the point where you need to have your memories altered and your emotional state re-indoctrinated, then where the hell is Naomi? Bring her back, goddammit! This tells me that APE is at least not directly responsible for these humans that we've seen inside the Klaxosaur cores, since Kokoro and Mitsuru would have been likely candidates for that if they actually did that sort of thing. It also raises the question on if Nana went back to being a pilot after she was indoctrinated as well, or if they immediately made her into an instructor. How did Nana even become someone that they trust as an instructor anyways? Why would they promote Nana to that position if they knew she was unstable? So many questions, so little time. At the end of the day, however, the tension and stakes are definitely felt more so than they were before, which I appreciate. But we still haven't had any deaths whatsoever, and no, Naomi isn't dead, shut the fuck up. However, if there was any point to kill off our first character, the wedding invasion would have been the time. Stuff like that makes me wonder if we'll even be seeing any deaths in the future at all. Other than the likeliness of Hero and 02, it just feels like they would have capitalized on a few deaths by now if they actually had any plans. I'm not ruling it out though, I still think that the odd death or two could still be a possibility. Please die, Futoshi. But it does make me wonder. I guess while we're talking about Futoshi, we might as well bring up his role this episode. Like I said in the preview analysis, it's nice to see him getting at least some kind of conclusion to his character arc, where he demands that he be the one to congratulate and marry Kokoro and Mitsuru, finally moving past his feelings and realizing that he just wasn't the one for her. Although I did have a thought while watching the end of the episode, thinking about the possibility of, now that Kokoro's mind has been wiped, what if Futoshi just tried to take advantage of that and made her think that he was the one getting married to her? Wouldn't that be fucked? Although that would kind of defeat the entire purpose of his character development here, so I hope that doesn't happen. Anyways, speaking of conclusions to character arcs, we did get one this episode that I felt was pretty weak, and now it's time to talk about IKONOS' involvement this episode. The entire reason I made a video on that preview a few days ago to begin with was because I thought some wild shit was going down with IKONOS' love love for Ichigo. And while we did get that, it didn't exactly go as I had hoped. For one, the preview completely baited me. Whether it was intentional or not, I don't know, but you don't see Ikono at the wedding in the preview, which led me to make some pretty bold assumptions, which I admit was a mistake on my part. Because she is there at the wedding, the preview just decided to show all of the cuts where she wasn't there. The problem that stems from Ikono this episode, though, is that everything just feels too easy. You have this entire conflict regarding her feelings for Ichigo that have been built up and hinted at since episode 4. Months later, we finally have a confrontation between the two where Ikono spills her heart out in a way that really makes you sympathize with her character. A lot of her dialogue seemingly transcended the show itself and made me just relate to her on an emotional level. Like, yeah, I get that jealousy. Yeah, I get those feelings that you're talking about. I'm not gay, but you know, I feel you. But then just like that, it's over. A hug and a little line from Ichigo is all it took for her to say, all right, I'm good now. And of course I'm paraphrasing, that's not all she said. And listen, I know that sometimes all it takes is a little venting and acknowledgement to overcome your problems, but I'm sorry, here it just feels like it was brushed by. Like the show has other things it needs to focus on right now, but realized, oh shit, we left that character thread hanging. We better patch that up fast. I hope to God there's more to this in the future, but at the moment, it feels like it's seemingly finished. It doesn't help that I was looking forward to seeing Ikono's past and potentially why she cared so much about Ichigo to begin with, and her flashback sequence literally equated to around 15 seconds of actual footage, but I don't know, something about this just doesn't sit right with me. Although I did appreciate that her reason for liking Ichigo was the same as Mitsuru's reason for looking up to and respecting Hiro, the fact that she gave her a name. Nice little parallel between them there. And while we're looking for positives in this situation, I also enjoyed the way that they tied Ikono slapping 9 Alpha into her talk here. The fact that she only did so to hide the fact that she agreed with everything that he was saying. However, on the flip side of my disappointment with Ikono, there was one character that did get some shine that I wasn't expecting at all. Hachi. He didn't necessarily get a lot of screen time, but the time that he did get was great. I love the scene where he sees the group in turmoil after Mitsuru and Kokoro have been taken, and you can see him visibly troubled despite him lacking emotions. You can tell on his face that he wants to say or do something to console the group, but he lacks the empathy required to say something that helps them cope. This comes into play later when he says this exact thing to Nana, who has seemingly been locked up into solitary confinement. I don't know if this is part of the emotional indoctrination process or if Nana is just being treated as an outcast right now, but we get a more solid look at her past as a parasite and what eventually caused her to relapse into puberty. Also, I don't care what any of you say, long hair Hachi is hype. During the actual assault scene, one detail worth noting is that 02 begins attacking the 9s once they arrive. It's a pretty brief but badass fight, but what's interesting here is that the 9s are keeping up with 02's supernatural strength and speed. You could attribute this to the fact that there's so many of them against only one of her, but even in the one-on-one encounters, they're keeping up with her effortlessly, taking punches that we know have sent soldiers in the past flying back, which only reinforces what I was saying last week. The 9s are likely also Klaxosaur human hybrids, the same as 02. Speaking of 02, we get a pretty scary scene near the middle of the episode where she's being attacked and haunted by the stamens that she's killed in the past, before being attacked by the giant Klaxosaur hand. Considering this happens right after she looks at the pages of the Beast and the Prince storybook she's been drawing, of both the Beast getting married and of course the Witch and the Beast making that deal, I feel like this is foreboding to the fact that 02 still has guilt and doubt of all the atrocities that she's committed in the past, maybe even wondering if she deserves to be with Hiro to begin with. This would fit with the dead stamens of her past returning to haunt her. What's interesting though is that yet again they show this Klaxosaur hand as some kind of antagonistic force, when in the opening we can see that it clearly won't be like that, as it catches 02 without any kind of malice or aggression. If anything, I feel like this Klaxosaur hand will only be an ally to us in the future. Now let's talk about APE for a bit, and it was during the small scene that we got with them this episode where we had a lot revealed about the state of their group and how they operate. It's apparent now that this council of members here are separated into two groups: the ones that have physical bodies and the ones that do not. This ties into something that was brought up to me in the comments of last week's episode, making the observation that during the sequence where the messengers were sent to ask the Klaxosaur princess to surrender, when the princess let loose her ghastly screech, all of the human soldiers and even one of the council members themselves grasped their head in agony, while we see that the other council member wasn't affected at all. This shows that of the two messengers that were sent, one was human and one didn't have a form at all. During this conversation among the council members, we see that the group of members that do have bodies were not told that the plan involved trying to assassinate the Klaxosaur princess. You'll remember that even in the scene in last week's episode, the human member of the council wasn't even aware that the bodiless member was going to try to kill the princess, and told him to stop. It's during this conversation where one of the female human members actually distinguishes that this council is APE and humans working together to achieve eternal life. So my guess would be that only the members who don't have bodies are actually APE, and the others are just ordinary humans. Either way, it's clear the direction this is going in when Papa promises the humans that once they realize their desires, that they'll be able to rid them of the shells that they call bodies, and they'll be able to attain incorporeal forms themselves. Just from this conversation, it's clear that Papa and the other intangible members are using the human members as another means to an end. But this does raise the question on who or what these APE members were before or even if they ever had physical bodies to begin with. Since there are human members that refer to them as a separate entity, it's almost like they're just straight up aliens. And of course, I have to mention the closing dialogue from Hiro at the end of the episode, which is just so goddamn hype. He says, "Everything we ever hold dear is always destroyed in the blink of an eye. If that is our destiny, then we can't let it rule us anymore." The rebellion arc is coming, guys. Get ready. As I speculated in the preview, this episode truly does feel like the transition into the final arc of our story. It's time for our group to rebel against APE and guarantee the happiness of our squad once and for all. And one final note I'd like to make, a confusion I had rather, is when 9 Alpha and Hachi are talking before the assault begins, and Hachi says that Squad 13 are exempt from the parasite indoctrination that wipes them of their emotions and memories, which was likely on the doctor's orders. 9 Alpha responds by saying not all of them, only 2. This line is confusing because in the end, he only ends up taking Mitsuru and Kokoro. So you could interpret what he's saying as, I'm not taking all of them, only 2. But I think he does legitimately mean only 2 members of the group are exempt from this indoctrination. The rest of them aren't, but he only chose to take the 2 who were meddling into things that are forbidden. Now the obvious question from here would be which 2 members are actually exempt from this. And of course my and most other people's response will likely be Hiro and Zero 2, even though they've already had to go through that once, so who knows. Either way, it's food for thought because that has been all from me for this darling in the Franxx episode review. Thank you all so much for watching, as always. I had some issues, but in general, this was a very nice episode, and it's cool to finally feel the stakes raised somewhat, and have that foreboding sense of a final act incoming. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below, and if you enjoyed anything I had to say here, I would really appreciate it if you liked the video, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see any of my content in the future. And of course, as usual, have a great day.